Alrighty gamers, this is No Such Time, and welcome to Retro Time. In today's video, I'm going to talk about these two games right here, and why I like one more than the other, or why I like them just as equal. So let's get into the breakdown. This video might be a tad bit long, but I'm going to break down the difference between the two, and which one I like more for its reason, and the other one I like more for the other reason. So I'm going to first break down video game mechanics for both, and why I think one is built more better for video game mechanics and the other one is built more for story-wise. So let's just break everything down, and I'm going to show you why I like each game individually. So, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are apparently supposed to directly connect to one another, and it's like it wants to connect, but at the same time doesn't. Breaking it down, the connection between the two, there is a connection, but it's a very limited, small idea of what a connection could be, because they didn't take some of the stuff that was in this Breath of the Wild game that was in Tears of the Kingdom. Now we saw signs of it, but it wasn't there fully because some of the Guardians were actually missing. And we didn't see Guardians in... Actually, all the Guardians were missing in Tears of the Kingdom. I did not see one Guardian in Tears of the Kingdom, but in Breath of the Wild, they were all over the damn place. And it gave the game a challenge. And for me, I liked having them. I don't know, there was just something about them that made the game a little bit more fun and challenging for that reason. Now, Tears of the Kingdom has its own fun individual challenges, but Tears of the Kingdom for me was much easier on gameplay mechanics than it was with Breath of the Wild. Now, Breath of the Wild, there was a lot of struggling in it, and it felt more, grindier in the I want to say the shrines. Yes, the shrines. Sorry, I had a brain fart. The shrines are what made the game more challenging. There was a certain set way you had to do the shrines. And in Tears of the Kingdom, that same method of doing the shrines wasn't there. Tears of the Kingdom was fun in that aspect, but it also left out a lot of things that was in Breath of the Wild. And the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom were more directed towards critical thinking. I want to say Breath of the Wild was more towards critical thinking in its own way, more of a deep thinking and more of a challenging way. But Tears of the Kingdom brought out your creativity, so you were more creative to get through the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom than you were with Breath of the Wild. The land of Hyrule, actually, when you look at it here, that might be the shading. But there's stuff that actually changed, like you can't even see. Yeah, you can. All right. So there is stuff that changed between the two. The surroundings, like I think I went into, where was it? There was one of the towns I went into where you have to find a lighthouse, I think it was. And it was up on a hill, and I'm looking around, and it wasn't the same. There was like totally something about it that just massively changed. So the map in Tears of the Kingdom is different, but it's not like a whole tremendous amount of different. The towns are still there, but the events in Tears of the Kingdom were a lot different. I don't know. I had a weird feeling about them. And it still felt like Zelda, but it didn't feel like the Breath of the Wild Zelda. It felt like it was a whole new, different story that they put in Hyrule. And as for like how far this takes place in the future, I believe, and this is just my line of thinking, but it feels like Tears of the Kingdom took place in a different future than what Breath of the Wild should have. All right, I feel like Breath of the Wild Breath of the Wild had boss fights that were a lot different than Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom's bosses fights were much more easier in some aspects, but they still were a bit challenging. As for Breath of the Wild, I had to go in and fight the bosses more times than I wanted to, and it's because the Windblight Ganon, no, what's the one that was in Varuda? Uh, the one that produced electricity was the one that was the hardest for me because he would just move so quickly that you had to. After playing it a few times, I got dirt really fast, but the challenge was there. The challenge with all the bosses in Breath of the Wild was there. The Tears of the Kingdom wasn't about challenging gameplay, is what I felt like. Tears of the Kingdom was more about like fun gameplay, just being creative, like thinking outside of the box kind of gameplay. I don't know what direction they were trying to go with this, but they, I felt like there's something there that just went missing. So, the land of Hyrule is still slightly different, but I don't know. There was just stuff in Tears of the Kingdom that made me be like, okay, this is different. And finding the chest with the outfits were a plus for Tears of the Kingdom. That's something that didn't get done in Breath of the Wild. And the one thing I do like about Tears of the Kingdom is the gameplay mechanics, or the gameplay in general, where you go from sky to underground, things like that. They really, really push limits, and I will give Nintendo credit for that. But it wasn't something I felt like they needed. We wanted a continuation of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and it was just something about the story that didn't make it feel like it got continued. And I don't know. It just felt like there was something totally different about it. And I like it, but I'm not exactly a full-fledged fan of Tears of the Kingdom over Breath of the Wild. And that's because Breath of the Wild to me feels more like if you were to go back in time and play a traditional Zelda, it feels like more of a traditional Zelda than it does in Tears of the Kingdom. And that's just my opinion. I'm sure people out there feel like that. But, we kind of went away from traditional Zelda, in my opinion. And what this feels like to me is the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons video games, where you have one that's more challenging and has a lot of critical thinking, and one that's just more creative and easier to work with. That's what they should have done with this, and more of an Oracle Ages, Oracle of Seasons kind of thing. But I think what they did is they just really, really, the timelines are just totally different here, and I can't really explain it. But if you played Age of Calamity, you would see what I mean, where Ganon was totally different in Age of Calamity, and I don't know if that's what messed up the timeline for these games. I think if they were to go back and be like, let's replace the Age of Calamity game, let's not pretend that exists here, and let's basically run the story off of the Breath of the Wild game itself. Then we would have probably a different story, but they had tried to interpret things from Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity into the game, and that's where I think they really, really changed everything. And it's just weird that, like, there's no sign, and people have brought this up, and I fully agree with this and understand it too, and it's not persuading my decision. I like each of these games here for their particular reasons, but I do think they lacked in more Triforce history here than they did in the Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild, it had some of the aspects of Zelda, the more traditional values, but I think Tears of the Kingdom really, really made everything easier, and it just feels like they could have made it more traditional Zelda, but they didn't put that aspect in there, and they wanted more of a free fun factor, which is okay. But I think out of both of them, gameplay mechanics, Tears of the Kingdom is more fun. Breath of the Wild is more grindier. I think if I was to sit down and wanted to have just a fun game to play, I would choose Tears of the Kingdom over Breath of the Wild, because Tears of the Kingdom really, really just has that fun factor to it when creating it inside of the shrines. Now, that breaks down how I feel about the two games. If you want a fun Zelda game, you go with Tears of the Kingdom. You go with this. If you want a more challenge, you go with this. Again, this goes back to the idea of Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons kind of feeling to this. I don't know if they were going with that direction, but that's what this feels like, and they could have had something there that crossed over the stuff into each game, which they slightly did. Actually, there was a thing I didn't really check out because I didn't collect horses in Breath of the Wild, but your horses transferred over to this. Now we can go into the story of the game. So the story of the game in Tears of the Kingdom, there was something very much lacking about its story, okay? And I like the game in general, I do. But the story really doesn't seem to cut it compared to Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, for me, had more of the emotional aspect of things, where you witnessed the connection with the champions, as opposed to no backstory, no real backstory or history of the sages. We got a backstory of the sages, but it was like a cutscene of how people just kept dying by Ganon instead of actually, having their own individual story. I'm sure if we got more story, or if we got a DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, we'd get a backstory on the sages, but we're not getting a DLC apparently for Tears of the Kingdom, which I think we do need. I think they could explain more about the sages in all that in DLC. Just a thought. But there is no real connection there. And my thing is, when you take a look in history, and you take a look at I can't think of his name right now. Rauru in Ocarina of Time, he was a guy. In this game, they made him look like a goat dragon creature, which I was like, and then the Sonya, the woman he was with, they were all Zonai, but it looked like there was an animal with a woman, which is, to me, is completely bizarre. I don't know why they would put that in a game like this. That, to me, I didn't like that, but, people out there fight me for it. I see Rauru from Ocarina of Time as a human being, as opposed to a dragon goat-like looking creature. I really don't know I don't know why they made the story the way they did in this. There was some lacking features in the story for Tears of the Kingdom as opposed to Breath of the Wild. And there was no connection whatsoever to the Triforce. It's just Tears of the Kingdom seems to have drifted away from what we knew Zelda used to be, as opposed to what Zelda is now. I don't know what they were doing when they did this. I don't absolutely hate the game. In fact, I want to go back and play it because I had a lot of fun playing it, and the exploration aspect is still there. But, going back to gameplay mechanics, Tears of the Kingdom was only challenging during the last fight, and the finding the sword was a bit more challenging too, because you didn't know where the hell that thing was. And I'm not gonna really give it away, but if you knew where the hell that thing was without looking at something to help you find it, well, then you're just downright a real brilliant person. You're not a dumbass at all. But yes, Tears of the Kingdom for me, the story wasn't as great as Breath of the Wild. I do like Tears of the Kingdom, and I do, I was hoping to get some DLC because they really, really could explain what happened with the sages instead of giving us, recut cutscenes of the sages over and over and over. They just, I don't know, I didn't like that. There's a lot of it that could have changed things. It's just very, very strange. It's very strange and very different compared to what I thought it was going to be. And I think a lot of people feel the same way I do. After playing it and you sit down and you think about it for a couple months on end, you start to see the difference between the two and which one you like more. And after sitting on this for a few months, man, the gameplay mechanics, The winner goes to... So, for gameplay mechanics, I think the winner goes to Tears of the Kingdom. It was a lot of fun, and if you didn't have fun playing this, then I don't know what to tell you. Story-wise, winner goes to Breath of the Wild. Now, again, like I said, there was a Zelda game that came out years ago that was very much like this, where one was a lot easier than the other for certain reasons. Now, if you were to take that and just do it again, you'd get these two. And that's what I feel like Nintendo was running with this for. This could be an Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons kind of thing. Because why is Ganon real in this one and kind of like a spiritual entity in this game? That's something I don't understand. And that's something that, that just is very, very strange to me. Ganon isn't actually physical till the end, and facing multiple forms of Ganon, that was a challenge. Tears of the Kingdom, they took some of the old bosses and just put them into the game and made them kind of easier. The one thing I didn't like about Tears of the Kingdom is the sages following you around, the spirit of the sages following you around. I would click those things multiple times, and it was a big issue. And you'll see that if you do play Tears of the Kingdom, or if you haven't yet, you'll see that. But Breath of the Wild didn't have that in there. You had the powers you had the powers induced into you, and you launched them off when you needed them. Like, their spirits were following you around, but they weren't out in the open walking around with you. So I just think that that's something they could have, like, not put into this game. They were still trying to connect them together, but in a different way. And the feeling of the second game, the Tears of the Kingdom versus Breath of the Wild, is totally different. And you would see what I mean. Anyway, that's how I feel about both of these games. I don't know how much more content I'm going to be making on this. I used to make a lot of Zelda content, but because I played both of the games, until I play like Skyward Sword HD or something else, you'll be hearing more about Zelda then. But until then, until then, I'll keep making other content here. But if you like this video and you like what you saw here, or if you like my opinion on this, or if you have a different opinion on this, comment down below. But until then, gamers, take it easy. Hit the like button if you like this. Please subscribe to the channel. And, hit that notification bell for more from me. And until then, gamers, keep gaming and take it easy.